Up on the hill, behind the Veterans Cemetery and Institute, is a piece of history. One of the oldest and largest black cemeteries in the state of West Virginia, which has more than 100 graves that date back to the 1800s.
That cemetery count has a lot. It's very difficult to count them because it's really never been taken care of, and so many of the graves have sunk down in the ground.
These graves are so old that a lot of them have slid down the hill towards the Veterans Cemetery. Institute also has 4 other black cemeteries in the area. During segregation in the 1950s, blacks and whites were not allowed to be buried together. In order to bury their dead in the black community, we found out that most cemeteries were privately owned, and family could only be buried there if they had known relatives.
Half of the people didn't have markers. They just had those little small plastic things. And so it's really hard to tell who's who.
Friends and family had a hard time going to visit their loved ones at the Institute Cemetery since it is on a large steep hill and in bad condition. Until 2 years ago, it didn't have any paved roads leading to the cemetery.
In the winter, it was awful when someone was buried. Sometimes they had to keep the body at the bottom of the hill for a while before they could even get it up the hill.
As the years progressed, it had been difficult to keep some of these black cemeteries maintained. Kent Mosley, who has quite a bit of family buried at numerous cemeteries, remembers helping to clean up his family graves with his father when he was young.
Here right now, I have my grandmother, my grandfather, 2 aunts, and an uncle buried here. We had to walk up, carry all kinds of cleaning equipment, size and things to cut all the weeds. Most of the time when you got here, you cut it only one time a year, just during Memorial Day.
In the early 1950s, things changed for these black cemeteries.
They got their first black in Dunbar.
The first black person was buried at Grandview Cemetery, which used to be just for white people.
And after then, of course, a lot of minorities go there now.
And as time went by, the cemeteries became more progressive and included everyone.
It used to be kind of one area that most of the minorities would go, but now there are kind of some different areas, and that's almost like all the cemeteries in the area.
The first black burial in Grandview Cemetery paved the way for other cemeteries across the state to be inclusive to African Americans. It has been a long time since any African American has been buried at these black cemeteries, but workers and families of the deceased do try to keep them maintained as best they can, while the history remains solid in all of our memories.
Western State University had care days, and they have come up a few times and taken care of that. And there's been some very, very dedicated black men that would come up here and clean it off at least once or twice a year.